So she was very closely associated with here during her very long reign.
Can we think then about today as the moment when the Queen slips from being the person who was our monarch into history, as it were? You know, she is somebody who people will now be reading about. That's a very significant moment, of course, for her family and friends, but in a way it's a shared moment for all of us.
Yes, I think that's right, and in a way it's a moment that will actually linger. It is true that she is passing from being our queen, and most of us never knew the time when there was any other monarch. She has now passed into history. We have a new sovereign, King Charles III. But of course it's true, firstly, that I think many people will remember this day all their lives. But secondly, it's going to take quite a while for my colleagues, historians and biographers, to reach some settled verdict on many aspects of her reign. We know already it was a remarkable reign. She was a great monarch and was much loved. All of that we know and is settled. But how future generations, future historians will come to see her is, I think, something that will need a lot of work on going forward.
It is very interesting that she maintained entirely consistently, as I understand it, the popularity of the monarchy throughout her reign. The figures were always the same. You know, people very much liked her when she came to the throne and very much like her today. It's interesting that as times have changed, and in many ways she was a monarch managing decline of an empire, decline of Britain's status in the world in so many ways, and yet every overseas paper that I got my hands on this morning, on its very front page was the fact that today was the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. It's interesting that there's a sort of tension between those two things, do you think?
Yes, I think that's right. It's clear that in many ways she presided over a period of de-imperialisation, for want of a better word.
It's a good word.
And de-Victorianisation, if you'd like that one as well. And part of her skill at managing that was that she never let on that that was what she was doing.
Yes.
And I think that was crucially important. Yet at the same time as those things were happening, she helped the monarchy adapt. Some thought too slowly, some thought too quickly. I think on the whole she called it right. And I think the recognition that she managed to sustain all of that over 70 years was a very extraordinary achievement. Just as is also the fact that, although we like to think to the contrary, over 70 years she sustained the fact that with very, very few exceptions, we never really knew what she thought about anything.
Isn't that true? And that's so often when I speak to people, indeed at the Jubilee I spoke to many people to try to get an insight, but I suppose it's understandable that somebody who was so constantly under scrutiny would want very firmly to keep part of their life private. I
think that's right, and the hope must be, I speak here of course as a historian, the hope must be that she did indeed keep a diary, which I think there is cause to suppose that she did, and let us hope that she expressed her views there trenchantly and candidly in a way that in public she very properly felt she couldn't.
So interesting to talk to you, Sir David Cannadine. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to share your thoughts with us.
It's been a great pleasure and privilege.
Thank you.
On its way from London to Windsor, the coffin of the Queen carried past large crowds on each side of the road here. Quite extraordinary that in the centre of London people were kept away from the procession. They're making up for it by coming here in their thousands, not just here but at Windsor, down the Long Walk, on each side. This is the road that runs right the way down from the castle to a statue in the far distance. You can just see on the skyline of George III. And Queen Anne had it paved for a carriage. Each side, it looks as though those are flower beds. They're not flower beds. They're flowers that have been laid by the gardeners of Windsor, that have been brought here by thousands of people over the last few days. They've been coming up the hill to the castle, each carrying just a small bouquet, obeying orders, not having it wrapped in cellophane or anything like that, and placing them here, and then the gardeners putting them into a pattern so they look like a planted garden, with sunflowers particularly strong for this time of year. The gates at the bottom are the Cambridge Gate, and this part is private. and this is where the coffin will be brought up towards the castle itself. And when it reaches the top, the Queen, the King and other members of the royal family will join the coffin of the Queen and accompany it from the top of the castle, from the round tower, where the royal standard's now flying, not at half-mast. The royal standard never flies at half-mast. It's being hoisted to the top of the flagpole to show that King Charles has just arrived. It was at half-mast when it was the Union flag before, but it stays there while the King is present. And so they will walk down through to what's called the lower ward, to St George's Chapel itself, where the